The chain around his neck caught the spotlight, but his eyes were fixed on the ground. Zay stood under a steel-grey skyphone buzzing in his hand. The tweet had gone viral, a screenshot of his college diploma. Bachelor of Arts, Comparative Literature, Harvard. The timeline was eating him alive. Street poet my ass, book club gangster, fake. He didn't move, didn't blink. His latest single had hit 1 million streams that morning, but now his label unfollowed him. His producer stopped replying. The world didn't just cancel him. It laughed. And the worst part, it was Amina. She hadn't meant for it to go public, but her poetry journal, the one with his annotated margins and soft memories, had been shared. Now everyone knew. In 24 hours, Zay had gone from Next Kendrick to a joke in YouTube comments. But what no one expected was how he'd rise again. No beats, no chains, just truth and a microphone. Stay with this story because the truth he speaks will echo louder than every lie he told. Zay lit his third blunt of the night, the smoke curling slow against the low ceiling of the studio like ghost hands. Bass thumped below his ribs, the beat looped, but he wasn't listening. He stared at the pad in front of him. Blank. Across the booth, Rel adjusted the mic and looked through the glass. Yo, Zay. You good? Zay nodded without meaning it. Bet. You already got that fire hook from last week. Just lay the verse when you're ready. Zay mumbled, yeah, but he didn't move. Rel turned back to the screen, oblivious. Truth was, Zay had already written the verse, a whole notebook full, but it wasn't in the voice they expected. No Draco by the bed, no mama cried while the sirens howled. It was about Dante's Inferno and the gentrification of language. It was about his father's hands. It was poetry, and poetry didn't sell on the block, not unless it came in a trap beat wrapper. Zay reached into his hoodie, pulled out a worn paperback copy of Baldwin's The Fire. Next time, then quickly tucked it back before anyone noticed. His throat tightened. He didn't belong anywhere anymore, not on those marble steps of Harvard, not here under this flickering fluorescent light. He'd built a whole persona from scratch. No one could know, not Rel, not the label, not even the fans. Zay had grown up in Crenshaw, yeah, but his mom had pulled 3 jobs to send him to prep school. Then scholarships took him all the way to Harvard. He'd walked across that stage with honors. But none of that looked good next to his chain. The door opened, letting in a breeze, and 2 guys from the local crew, D-Lo and Tiny K. Jose D-Lo grinned, dapping him up hard. Heard you just hit $500,000 on bricks and prayers. Zay nodded, forcing a smirk. You the voice of the block now, Tiny K added. You the one. That sentence stung more than it flattered. The one, the voice of a place he hadn't fully lived in for years. He slid the notebook off the table and into his bag. Appreciate it. They didn't notice the tension in his shoulders, or the pages he'd ripped out and burned earlier that week, the ones that started with, let me tell you the truth, not the myth. But someone had noticed once. Amina. She came to mind out of nowhere, like a verse you forgot you wrote until it rhymes again. Her voice soft but fierce, reading Gwendolyn Brooks at that open mic in Boston. They'd stayed late that night, walking under amber street lamps, trading lines from Neruda and Nas. I think the streets deserve poetry too, she'd said. Real poetry. Not just pain porn. He remembered kissing her hand before she got into that lift. Her fingers smelled like ink. They hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. Not since he disappeared from her world the moment he signed with his label and traded his corduroy jacket for a Montclair. Later that night, Zay sat in the back seat of an Uber hoodie, up staring out at the city. Downtown Los Angeles looked like an expensive lie. His phone buzzed. DM from Osamina.words. Saw your freestyle on 92.3. Still got that same pocket. Zay didn't breathe. He tapped a reply, paused, deleted it. He wanted to say, I still remember your poem about your brother. I still quote it in my head. Instead, he typed, You still in LA? She replied almost instantly. For a reading. Tomorrow night. Small crowd. You should come. He hesitated. The studio was booked. Rel would want to lay the chorus. But he tapped back. Drop the pin. The next night he wore plain black jeans, no chains. Just a cap pulled low. The venue was a cramped bookstore in Limert Park. Fewer than 30 people. It smelled like pages and jasmine incense. He slipped in quietly, avoiding the chairs, and stood near the back. And there she was, Amina. She hadn't changed much. Hair in thick braids, a green silk scarf at her throat, but her voice even stronger now. My brother once said the block don't want your tears, but I cried anyway, and it watered the truth, and the truth bloomed sideways like ivy choking everything I couldn't say out loud. Zay's hands clenched. She didn't look at him until the very end. And when their eyes met, it wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was a quiet question. He didn't have the answer. Afterward, she found him outside. Didn't think you'd actually show. I almost didn't, he admitted. She studied him. Still writing. He shrugged. Just rhymes now? She smiled sadly. Used to be more than that. He wanted to tell her everything. The fear, the masks, the nights he rewrote verses to be less educated. But instead, he asked, "You good?" She nodded. Just tired of people pretending not to feel. He chuckled softly. Yeah, that's a whole verse. They stood in silence as sirens echoed in the distance. Then she pulled out a small notebook. Remember this? His breath caught. Her poetry journal. From back then. She opened to a page, his handwriting in the margins. You wrote this, she whispered. You edited my lines like you knew what I meant before I even finished the thought. He looked away. Don't show that to nobody. She blinked. Why not? He hesitated. Then in a voice so low it barely existed. They'll eat me alive. She didn't argue, didn't push. She just closed the notebook and said, I hope one day you let them choke on the truth instead. The next morning, Zay woke up to the kind of light that made everything feel raw. Pale, unforgiving, slicing through the blinds and landing across his open notebook like judgment. He hadn't slept much. Amina's voice still lingered in his ears. That line, let them choke on the truth instead, wouldn't let go. He rolled onto his back phone, buzzing again. Group chat. Rel Yo Zay label wants you at the shoot. Noon. Chains, heavy bars, heavier. Another message from Tiny K. You still on for the club tonight? That Spotify guy gonna be there. Dress loud. Zay tossed the phone aside. He sat up slowly, rubbing his hands over his face. A single line sat in his notebook, written in the middle of the page like a scar. What if the lie becomes louder than the verse? At the shoot, everything smelled like sweat gun oil and rented bravado. Fake stacks of cash, fog machines. 2 models barely dressed perched on the hood of a matte black G-Wagon. Zay stepped out of the car and someone shoved a chain into his hands. Props. He looked at the gold. It was too heavy, not in weight, in memory. He wore it anyway. Rel clapped him on the back. Aye, you ready to talk your shit? Zay gave the camera a dead-eyed stare and nodded. The beat dropped. He mouthed the lines sharp and cold, every word carefully scrubbed of truth. Just rhythm and image, hard vowels, bravado. No past, no books, no Amina. After the shoot, Rel handed him a blunt. You killing it, bro. Real talk. Zaya took it but didn't light it. Thanks. You think this next single's gonna chart top 10? Rel grinned, teeth white as bone. Zay looked at the footage on the monitor himself, draped in chains, face like a mask. Yeah, he said quietly. It'll chart. 2 days later, Amina sent him a voice memo. He didn't expect it. He hesitated before pressing play, her voice low and intimate. I read that note you left in the back of my journal. The one you folded and slid between the pages of October Bones? You wrote, some truths can't be worn, only whispered. Why are you still whispering, Zay? He sat on the floor surrounded by scribbled pages. None of them felt right anymore. All these months writing verses for the trap, for the label, for the lie. He opened a new page. Wrote. My mother cried when I got into Harvard. Not because I made it, but because it meant she'd lose me to a world she never touched. Later that week, Amina invited him to her apartment. He brought her flowers, nothing fancy, just daisies. She laughed when she opened the door. You serious? Zaya shrugged. Better than pulling up with a Henny bottle, right? Her apartment smelled like lavender and old paper. Poetry books stacked everywhere. A record player spun slow jazz. They sat by the window. Amina poured tea. No sugar, just hot and bitter. She looked at him. You scared? He nodded. Every day. What scares you more, being fake or being exposed? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a leather journal. He handed it to her. Everything I actually write. The real stuff. She opened it. First page. The only time I ever felt real was when I stopped trying to be. She read in silence. Then she looked up, eyes glassy. This is what people need. He shook his head. They want bars, guns, pain with a beat. No, she whispered. They want truth, but they're afraid of it, just like you are. The next evening, he went live on Instagram. Just for a moment. No filters, no chains, no background beat. He looked into the camera, paused, spoke. Y'all ever lie so good you forget what your own voice sounds like? Then he ended the live. Didn't save it, didn't explain. But the comments flooded in. Yo, you good. What's this about? Nah, man, don't go soft now. 3 days later, it exploded. A rising rapper named Murdersea dropped a diss track called Book of Lies. It was venom, pure theater. Zay's real name, his college transcript, a yearbook photo of him in a debate team blazer, even a quote from his senior thesis. You think he spit bars, he spit essays with commas. He read Shakespeare, then faked trauma. Social media didn't just turn, it howled. Memes, clips of Zay talking about the block overlaid with pictures of Harvard dorms, mock interviews, fake voiceovers. So when I was reading Wuthering Heights, I decided to drop a mixtape. Even people who once called him genius started backtracking. Always knew he was too polished. Industry plant. Soft. Rel ghosted him. The label dropped him. Tiny K tweeted laughing emojis. But worst of all, Amina went silent. Zay sat on his balcony in silence. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The city moved below like it didn't care. He picked up his journal. Read a line, then another. Then he whispered, "Truth rhymes better than lies." He closed the book and opened a new one. Zay didn't leave his apartment for almost a week. The shades stayed drawn. The studio was silent. No calls, no beats, no crew. Just his voice in his head, echoing old lines he no longer believed in. He kept reading the same tweet over and over again. Murdersea, another Harvard thespian trying to cosplay pain. This, the rap game, not a poetry slam. The internet ran with it. Clips of Zay's old freestyle videos were edited with violin music and library sound effects. TikToks mimicked him holding a book mid-verse, reciting fake Shakespeare raps. Even a barbershop podcast titled, "An Episode Zay, the Fraud Literature Ain't Street." It wasn't just jokes, it was a smear, and people believed it. One night he went live, not to explain, not to defend, just to see. No jewelry, no hoodie, no lighting rig, just Zay. He stared at the lens for a full minute before speaking. Then he whispered, "I grew up on Crenshaw. My mum worked 3 jobs. I wrote in the margins of overdue textbooks. I got jumped. I buried friends. And I also got into Harvard. Those things aren't opposites. They're both me. And I'm done pretending they can't exist in the same verse." He ended the live. No hashtags, no filter. For the first time, he didn't feel like performing. That same night, there was a knock at his door. Soft, rhythmic, 3 slow taps. Zay opened it. Amina. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup. Just her and the cold night air. She stepped in without a word. I didn't know what to say, she finally whispered. When it blew up. When they twisted everything. He nodded. Me neither. Silence settled between them. Then she reached into her tote bag, pulled out a small speaker. Press play. He did? It was her voice, spoken word. But this time, the background was different. No jazz, no snaps. Just distant sirens, a muffled heart monitor, a clock ticking. She layered her poetry over real sounds, street noise and hospital monitors, the rhythm of breath and metal gates closing. And somehow it worked. Raw, real, no beat necessary. Zay listened, transfixed. "You made this," she nodded. "I've been experimenting. Words don't need a beat to hit." He stared at her. "Teach me." They started recording that night, not at the studio, on the floor of his bedroom. Zay pulled out every notebook he'd ever hidden. Poems about his mom, about losing his cousin to police, about the shame of hiding his own story, about watching friends die while he read Baldwin under blankets. Amina read them with quiet reverence. Then she said, "Let's record." No edits. Just breath. They laid down tracks with nothing but a mic and a laptop. No beat, no auto-tune, just his voice and silence between the lines. The project was small at first. He didn't even name it, just uploaded a spoken word video to YouTube titled Track 1. No tags, no description, just the truth sounds different. Then Track 2. Then 3. By Track 5, people started noticing. The comments were different, quieter, more thoughtful. I didn't expect to cry. This ain't rap. This is healing. Why does silence hit harder than drums? Murdersey tried to clown him again, but this time no one laughed. The jokes felt old, because Zay wasn't trying to be anything anymore. He just was. A small indie label reached out, said they'd support him, no changes, no styling, just distribution. Zay hesitated, then said yes, but on his terms. Amina co-produced. They called the album Margins, 12 spoken word tracks, all in one take, no features, no beats. Each one told a piece of his story. Track 4, My Mother's Hands. Track 6, Boys Don't Cry in Harvard Dorms. Track 9, Chains I Bought to Hide. Track 12, No Apology, No Beat. The rollout was quiet. No press tour, no Breakfast Club interview, no flexing on IG, just a single tweet. This is me, no mask. The album dropped at midnight. By 8 a.m., it was number 4 on Apple Music. By noon, number 2 on Spotify. By the end of the day, number 1. Zaya sat in his living room staring at the screen. Her one album in the country, Zay, Margins. He didn't scream, didn't dance, just sat. Amina brought him tea. No sugar. Still bitter. Still real. Feels quiet, she said. He nodded. That's how truth moves. Not loud, but deep. And then came the call. Coachella. Main stage. Spoken word. No dancers. No background visuals. Just a mic. And 50,000 people waiting. The night of the performance, Zay stood backstage. No chain, no jewelry, no hype man. Just black jeans, white tee, and a notebook in hand. He looked out into the crowd. He could feel his heart in his throat. Amina touched his arm. You don't have to prove anything. He nodded. I'm not here to prove. Just to speak. He walked out. The crowd cheered, then went silent. He stepped up to the mic, took a breath, and said, They said I was fake because I read and bled and spoke in complete sentences. But I never faked the pain. I just chose words that didn't rhyme with trauma. The crowd was still. Then it erupted. But he held up his hand, let the silence settle again, and whispered, Truth rhymes better than lies. The morning after Coachella, Zay woke up to the sound of his own voice, not in his head, but from the neighbor's window. They were playing Track 6 Boys Don't Cry in Harvard Dorms. The lines came back like a quiet echo. I held my breath in a dorm full of names I couldn't pronounce. And when I cried in the bathroom stall, I flushed twice, like shame could be washed away. He lay still for a long time. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like running. Not from himself, not from the past, not from the truth. He reached for his phone. Hundreds of messages, some from old friends, others from strangers. One from his old English professor. You did what Baldwin dreamed of. You brought truth back to the people who needed it most. Proud of you, Z. Zay stared at the message, heart swelling, then scrolled to the one he'd been avoiding. Rel, you still family, I fumbled. You didn't. Respect. He didn't reply right away. But he didn't block him either. Later that week, Zay got a call from NPR, an interview. Not about the drama, not about the scandal, about margins, about silence, about the choice to abandon beats and speak bare. He agreed. They recorded it in a quiet studio, not the flashy kind. Just 2 mics, a rug, a glass of water. The host leaned forward. Zay, you're now the first spoken word album to chart at number 1 in over 2 decades. And yet, you did it with no traditional rap features, no viral promo. How? He smiled softly. I stopped trying to sound like what they wanted and just said what I never let myself say before. What changed? He paused. Then, a girl once told me people aren't afraid of truth. They're just waiting for someone else to say it first. 2 months passed. The noise faded. The memes stopped. The headlines moved on. But Margins kept streaming, quietly, steadily. It didn't drop. Because it wasn't just an album. It was a wound people recognized in themselves. Zay started doing small venues, spoken word nights, bookstore gigs, college readings, sometimes 50 people, sometimes 500. But every time the room held its breath. At one event in Oakland, he saw a boy in the front row, maybe 16, hoodie pulled low. After the reading, the boy approached, notebook in hand. "You probably don't got time," he muttered. But, I write too." Zay took the notebook, flipped to a page, read it. It was raw, clumsy in parts, but true, bleeding at the edges. Zay looked up. "You ever read Hughes?" The boy shook his head. "Come to the next show. I'll bring you a copy." He handed the notebook back. "You don't gotta rhyme to be real. Just gotta speak." Meanwhile, Amina had started her own wave, a podcast called Margins Between Us. She interviewed spoken word artists, community poets, and everyday people who had something to say. Zay was her first guest. In the first episode, he told the full story. No performance, no sound design, just him, saying I was afraid the streets would laugh at who I really was. But turns out, they were just waiting for someone to stop performing pain. Not everything was perfect. Murdersey dropped another track, tried to rekindle the beef, but it landed flat. Even his own fans said it felt tired. The world had moved on. Zay didn't clap back, didn't respond. He just tweeted, "Every bar I write now I owe to silence." One day he visited his old neighborhood, walked the block he used to run through after school. Some kids recognized him. "Yo, you the poetry dude?" He smiled. "Yeah, something like that." One of them asked, "Why don't you rap no more?" He knelt down. "Because sometimes truth don't fit inside a beat." The kid blinked. "That's deep," Zay chuckled. "Write that down." Back home, Amina sat at the kitchen table, sorting through old journals. Zay came in with groceries. He paused, watching her for a moment. "What you digging for?" She held up a page. His handwriting. A note from their college days. "Someday, when I stop being afraid, I'll write something that don't rhyme, but still bleeds." She smiled. "I think you already did." That night, they sat on the rooftop. The city hummed below. Zay pulled out a small speaker, pressed play. It was a new track. Still no beat, just silence. But this time it wasn't pain. It was joy, soft, warm, growing. A verse about healing. Amina leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. One last thing happened before the year ended. The Grammys. Category Best Spoken Word Album. Nominee margins. He didn't expect to win. Didn't even want to. But when they called his name, he walked on stage. Suit, no chain, he looked into the crowd, held the mic gently, and said, "They laughed when they found out I was a poet, but poetry saved my life. So I wrote it back. And this time, it rhymed with me." The next morning, his Grammy sat untouched on the windowsill. No glass case, no shelf lighting, just the golden gramophone catching sun through half-drawn blinds. Zay stood barefoot in the kitchen, steeping tea. Jasmine like the incense from that poetry night in Limert Park. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt still. No flashing lights, no roar of a crowd, just quiet. And that was enough. Behind him, Amina flipped a page in her journal. "I know you're trying to act like it doesn't matter," she said. Zay smiled into the steam. "I'm just trying not to need it." She stood, came over, leaned into his back, her arms wrapped around his waist. "You don't, but it's okay to want it." He nodded slowly. The Grammy wasn't validation. Not anymore. But maybe it was a bookmark, a reminder of where he was when he stopped hiding. A week later, Zay returned to Harvard. Not for press, not for optics, to speak. An English professor, the same one who'd sent that message, invited him to guest lecture a seminar on modern American storytelling. He walked into the classroom wearing sweats and a denim jacket, the same way he'd show up to any open mic. The students stared silent, unsure of what to expect. He set his journal on the table. No slides, no outline. Just a copy of margins beside a stack of poems he'd once written in the back of lecture halls. Then he said, "I used to sit right there." He pointed at the fourth row. "I used to pretend I wasn't from where I was from. I thought if I talked too soft or too smart, I'd lose where I came from. But I was wrong." He paused. "Turns out, the most dangerous thing you can do isn't telling the truth. It's hiding it." Then he opened to the first page of his journal, read aloud. The classroom stayed silent for a long time afterward. No applause, no questions, just the sound of a world shifting in small, unspoken ways. The next chapter of Zai's life didn't come with a contract. No tour bus, no entourage, just workshops, spoken word residencies, collaborations with community centers and public schools. He started a writing program called Truth in Ink, giving young people the tools to tell their own stories without shame. One girl wrote a poem about her brother being deported, another about a stutter she masked behind humor. They wrote like it mattered, because Zay had shown them that it did. Some nights he and Amina still sat on rooftops. They no longer talked about pain like it was currency. Now they spoke of craft, of subtlety, of beauty. "Do you miss the stage?" she asked once. He shook his head. "I don't miss being seen. I just miss being heard." One morning a letter arrived in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single page. "I'm still not ready to speak, but your words help me stop lying to myself." "That's something. Thank you." Zay folded the letter and slid it into the back of his journal. Not for show, for memory. Years passed. The charts moved on, the culture shifted, but margins remained. It became one of those quiet records passed hand to hand, whispered about in dorms, found in headphones during subway rides when life felt too loud. It wasn't flashy, but it endured. Zay wasn't chasing relevance, he was chasing honesty. And in that pursuit, he had become something rarer than famous. He had become real. One final scene. Zay stands at a mic in a small high school gym. The crowd is restless, teens, teachers, a few tired parents, folding chairs, a squeaky floor. He flips open a notebook, reads a poem titled Louder Than Chains. His voice is calm. "I wore lies like jewelry, let them shine, so you wouldn't see my skin. But the truth doesn't glitter. It glows." The room goes quiet. In the back, a boy slouches deep into his hoodie. He lifts his phone, starts recording. A future artist, a future story. Zay finishes the poem. No mic drop, no bow. Just a breath, a nod, and a whisper. Say something true tonight, even if no one claps. Sometimes the lies we tell aren't meant to fool others. They're meant to protect the parts of ourselves we're afraid won't survive the truth. But Zay's story reminds us real strength isn't about image. It's about honesty. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself just to fit in? What would happen if you let it speak? If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Share your voice, your truth. And if you'd like more stories like this, feel free to subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for staying till the end. See you in the next one.